My name is Bailey Parker, and I am the Communications Director here at the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. Got to give the disclaimer, this presentation is not meant to serve as a substitute for reading the various laws discussed. We're not going to read any specific laws today or really speak about them, and you don't want me to talk about laws. I'm not an attorney. I would be giving really bad legal advice. I can't interpret laws. It'd be a really bad interpretation because, again, I'm not an attorney. So this presentation is merely serving as an introduction and overview of the topic. All right, let's get into this. So, unwanted call statistics. This is coming from the National Do Not Call Registry for fiscal year of 2022. So they had over 3 million do not call complaints. What does this actually mean? So that means somebody who gets an unwanted call, any unwanted call. So it doesn't have to specifically be a telemarketer or specifically a robocall or specifically a scam call. It could be any unwanted call and is reported to the FTC's, and the FTC is the Federal Trade Commission, the Do Not Call Registry. Now, the Do Not Call Registry has active almost 250 million registrants, okay? This is complaints over time. Now, I think this can be a little deceiving here because when I first looked at this, I thought, oh, wow, there's less complaints. But really, I don't think there's less complaints. I think maybe it's leveled out a bit. There definitely has been spikes. Definitely was a huge spike in 2021, and it's gone down a little bit, but it's more leveled out, I would say, in 2022. But these are still massive amounts of complaints. You've got to think that this is, there are months of time where there's hundreds of thousands of complaints every single month. So these are still large amounts of complaints. The top 5 complaint categories for unwanted calls. Number 1, imposter. This does not shock me in any way, shape, or form. So we'll get into what an imposter call is, but that was the number 1 reported, almost 300,000 reports of that. Warranties and protection plans. This includes those car warranty calls you guys probably get, including myself. So yeah, warranties and protection plans, number 2, about 200,000 reports. Medical and prescriptions. That could include Medicaid, Medicare calls, anything like that. Maybe even those automated calls you get from pharmacies, things like that. Reducing debt. So any type of maybe debt collection, debt consolidation, credit repair, credit, any type of reducing debt is in there. And then number 5, energy, solar, and utilities. So that's at 55,000. So way down there, but still a considerable amount at 55,000. And then complaints by call type. I think this is interesting. So 60% of people said that the calls were robocalls, meaning that there was not a live person on the other end. That when they picked up, they did not get an active live person. 30% of people did. Now, there is 10% of people who just didn't say what type of person or robot there was. But that means that 60% of people qualified their phone call as a robocall. And I'm not so shocked by that. Robocalls are inexpensive to do for a business. It's a lot more economical for a business or even a scammer to have a robot on a computer complete the phone call than actually having a live person on the other end. They can complete a lot more phone calls by having a robot do that. So I spoke about imposter phone calls. What's an imposter phone call? We actually experienced this recently, and I wanted to share this. If you're a part of our subscriber to our email list, you got this press release just a few days ago, actually, on Monday. We got 2 reports from consumers saying that somebody was calling around acting like us. That's an imposter scam. That is an imposter. An imposter is when somebody is acting like somebody else, trying to gain some sort of information, whether that's personal identifying information or financial information. In this situation, it was very specific. The imposters were claiming to be us, saying that they were looking at recent solar panel purchases and complaints, because we take complaints against solar companies, any company. So they were claiming to be looking at solar panel complaints, and they knew somehow that these consumers had recently purchased solar panels. So they were requesting personal identifying information from these consumers and saying, we're with the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs. That is a pure imposter phone call. I will say they didn't take it far enough. And we called the number back that they were calling around on, and they outright still acted like they were Consumer Affairs until we said, no, we actually are Consumer Affairs, and then they hung up on us. If you have something like this happen, please, please, please hang up, call the number you know. If this happens to you specifically and they're acting like SCDCA, no, we are never going to call you and ask for your personal identifying information. We're not going to do that. We're not going to call you out of the blue and be like, hey, can you give us your name, date of birth, and all the information about your recent purchases? We're not going to do that ever. So please hang up on them and call this number on the bottom or our official number, which is 803-734-4200. That's the only number you should be getting, you should be calling and ask if it's legitimate. So that's what an imposter phone call is. And when it comes to spam texts, because texts also are roped into all of this, what do they look like? So these are two texts that I have gotten, because I mentioned I'm also a consumer. I get these things, and I wanted to show examples of what I also get. So I received this message a few months ago. If you have no driving violations or tickets this current half year, it is in our rights to give you this promo. Very suspicious looking link. Reply end to unsubscribe. So there are two problems with this text. The link is very suspicious, one. You should never click that link. And then two, the tempting thing to do is they're giving you an in to reply end to unsubscribe. No. You never want to reply end, okay? Because then you are showing them you have an active phone number, and then they're gonna keep sending you things, okay? This next one's my favorite. I got this a few weeks ago, and it made me laugh so hard. There's something I need to know. Please be honest. Did you ever really love me? I've always wondered, was I enough for you when we were together here? I felt like you had lost it for me. It just didn't seem the same. So it still makes me laugh, obviously, reading it. So this is very clearly a scam to me, because first of all, this is coming from a Connecticut phone number, and my phone number, my cell phone number, is a Connecticut phone number. That's where I'm originally from. I did not date anyone in Connecticut when I was there, so I have no idea who this could be. And this seems like a very odd thing to send somebody. This is becoming more common, where scammers are trying to bait you into responding. Anything. Even hey, I think this is a wrong phone number. Or hey, I don't think this was for me. I think this was for somebody else. Or who is this? Maybe I deleted the phone number. They're just looking for some sort of response. So then they can either initiate a phone conversation with you, or they can just know that it's an active phone number. I did not respond to this poor lonely person, okay? What is a robocall? Because I mentioned that a robocall is a very specific thing. It's not just any phone call you get. So a robocall is a recorded message instead of a live person. So when we saw those numbers earlier of the Federal Trade Commission saying that people qualified their phone calls as a robot, a robocall, that's what it is. It's not a live person on the other end. It's a recorded message. So if someone's trying to sell you something, you get a call, someone's trying to sell you something, it's illegal as a robocall unless you gave them written permission to call you that way. You cannot get robocalls that are selling you products. That's illegal unless you've given them written permission to do so. Now, if you start getting robocalls that are trying to sell you things, there may be something that you have forgotten that you signed. If you recently signed a contract, if you recently signed terms and conditions of a contract, you may have given written permission for a company to start robocalling you, and you didn't even realize it because you didn't read the terms and conditions or you didn't read the fine print. So just keep that in mind. But it is illegal for companies to robocall you trying to sell you something if you didn't give them written permission. So some robocalls are allowed without your written permission. The key is it can't be trying to sell you something. So what an example of this would be is your doctor's office is calling with a pre-recorded message reminding you of an upcoming appointment. That is totally fine. That is not illegal. Don't go reporting your doctor's office because you got an automated phone call reminder about your upcoming physical, okay? Those robocalls are allowed without your permission. Spoofing. So this is not just for phone calls anymore, but this is the most common with phone calls. This is when scammers can mask how they're contacting you. So it's most common with phone calls where they can actually cover their phone number on your caller ID with any phone number they want. And so your caller ID shows up as any phone number, but they're actually calling from another phone number. So they could call you from your mom's phone number, from your brother's phone number, from the IRS's phone number, from SCDCA's phone number, but it's not actually where they're calling from. That's what spoofing is, okay? Now, spoofing can apply to every form of contact now. It can apply to texting, it can apply to email, but phone is the most common. And neighbor spoofing is where people get into the most trouble because, and I know when I go out and I speak to people in person, they say, well, I answer the phone because I recognize the area code. And I think it might be somebody that I need to speak to. No, scammers know that. Spam calls know that. Telemarketers know that. It's not even necessarily a scammer, but a telemarketer knows that you're more likely to answer the phone if it's an area code you recognize. That's called neighbor spoofing. They pick a phone number that has an area code that's similar to yours or close to you. So an 843 number, an 803 number, whatever other area code it's in South Carolina. They know you're more likely to answer it. That's called neighbor spoofing. They mentioned this, they're going to pick a number from a company you know, a government agency like us, or from somebody that you know and trust. So how are we going to get less of these unwanted calls and texts? Number one, this is a hard sell because I talk about this a lot. And I'm just going to put it out there, but this is probably the most effective way you as a consumer can get less unwanted calls and texts. And I know it works because I do it, okay? Don't answer or respond, okay? And you'll say, Bailey, what do you mean don't answer? How is that good advice? How am I just supposed to not answer my phone? Okay, so this is the deal. When you answer your phone or you respond to a text, it signals to the caller or texter that it's an active line. Even if you don't fall for their scam tactics or whatever they're selling, they've still gathered that you have an active line that you answer. And I get the question all the time of like, well, I have a voicemail. Does that signal? No, it's a different thing. Okay, so they want to see that you're an active phone line that answers the phone and will say hello, or even just answer, because they can tell the difference. Because there are some people that say, well, I answer and don't say anything. They know, okay? So they know that you have an active phone line now. So even if you don't fall for their tactics, whatever they are, they will sell your number to other spam callers, and you're going to get flooded with more calls. Guarantee it. And I talk to a lot of people who say, well, I like to mess with the scammers. I'll answer the phone and I'll mess with them and I'll joke around with them or whatever. I think it's funny. Okay, but then at the same time, they complain about how they get so many scam calls. It's because you keep answering the phone. Let it go to voicemail. Do not answer it. I would say this is the most effective way to get less of these unwanted calls. Again, we're never going to stop all of the unwanted calls and texts, but this will lessen the amount we get. Now, I also hear all the time, well, I get a lot of phone calls from doctors' offices, or I get phone calls that I need to answer, or whatever it may be. I do too. I get it. I get a lot of calls from doctors' offices, appointments. I've got small children who are at school, and I get calls from unknown numbers all the time. So it can be hard to not answer the phone. I would try and always follow the rule. If it's a number you don't recognize, even coming from an area code that you recognize, if it's somebody you need to speak to, they will leave a voicemail, and it's not going to be a robot voicemail trying to sell you something. It may be a doctor's office saying you have an appointment on this date, but it's going to be a live person telling you how to contact them back, okay? So please, I know this is a really hard sell, but this is probably the most effective way to get less of those unwanted calls and texts. And I swear by it, okay? As soon as I stopped answering those calls, it did take a little bit, but I get a lot less spam calls now because I don't answer. Because why would they continue to call your number if they know you're not going to answer? Number 2, call blocking resources. So there are dozens, if not hundreds, of call blocking resources out there. Here are some of the key things to keep in mind when you're doing this. For mobile specifically, there are built-in features in your phone that you already have, okay? You can block specific numbers, but there are also things in iPhones and Androids, whatever type of phone you have, that you can block incoming phone calls that aren't in your contact list, or they'll immediately be sent to voicemail. For some people, that doesn't work, so that might be too much for you, but look at and see what your phone already has in call blocking, specifically for mobile. See what services your carrier offers. So if you call AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, whoever you have, they may have additional call blocking that you can activate on your phones. Just ask, is there a fee? Is it free? There are also tons of call blocking apps. But here's the key. You got to do your research. Look at the reviews. Read the fine print, okay? Because again, you might be signing into a contract where all of a sudden you're going to start getting tons of telemarketing phone calls from other companies, okay? So read the fine print and see how they're blocking the phone calls. When it comes to landlines, there are actually call blocking devices that you can get for landlines that are pure landlines, that aren't internet-based, because there are internet-based landlines and there are non-internet-based landlines. If you don't know if the landline you have is internet-based or not, call your provider and ask. If you have a traditional landline, you can actually get a little box that attaches to the phone line, and it will block phone calls. And then you can block individual phone numbers. I know some people say that it can only block so many phone numbers at a time, and then you have to start throwing out numbers. So there are limitations on those devices. Some devices will use things called blacklist databases that know very well-known scam numbers that they update often, and so they'll block them as they come into your landlines. Some of these blacklist databases will divert calls to voicemail, or they'll just, your phone won't ring, but a little light will flash instead, so you don't have to hear the phone ringing. Some devices will use whitelists for approved numbers. It will help limit the number of calls coming through. So again, if you have an internet landline, it kind of is similar to mobile devices. So you can install a call blocking device. Again, do your research, look at the reviews, read the fine print, see how they're blocking them, see what your services, what services your carrier provides first. Here are some additional call blocking resources. So when you download the PDF, you'll be able to click on this link. I'm going to open it up and I want to share it with you real quick. If it will open. That's the key. Okay, here we go. So this is, oh wait, this is not the right one. Let me open the correct one. I'm not going to open the right one because I want to show you the, I will just copy and paste it in. We're going to go old school. So this is an entire PDF that the Federal Communications Commission has created about stopping unwanted robocalls and texts. Now, this is long, and it includes all of these tips that talk in length about spoofing and caller ID, robotexts. It's a lot of information that I think is good information if you don't know anything about robocalls or scams in general. What I think is the most useful, though, if you're just looking to call block, you'll scroll down in this PDF and you go to page 6. And this is where all of these resources all are. It gives you the links to all of the major providers, and it will tell you additional resources that each of these providers may have on call blocking and labeling tools available to consumers. So I think this is a great thing that you can use. So landline, wireline, VoIP, which is internet-based landlines, wireless, mobile, third-party analytics resources, wireless device solutions. I mean, there's a lot here that you can go through and see. The only thing that they don't specifically have is like a list of apps that they recommend. So you're not going to get that specifically from the FCC. You're not going to get that from us either. We aren't here to recommend companies, and we're not here to recommend any specific product to you. But I think that's a really good starting place if you're looking for contact information for providers and what they may have for you. Okay, so number 3, sign up for the Do Not Call Registry. And before you yell at me that the Do Not Call Registry doesn't work, hear me out. Hear me out, guys. Just hear me out. Okay, so we've talked about how it's in the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. This was specifically to stop unwanted sales calls. It's free to register for any phone number in the US, including cell phone numbers. And you may still receive phone calls of sales calls, telemarketing calls for up to 31 days after you register. So here are the rules. Telemarketers, we're not going to go through every single one of these things, but they have specific hours that they have to follow. They can't be deceptive or abusive or lie about the terms of their offers. And they can't ask you to pay in these specific ways. So like money transfers. They can't ask you to do pins from reloadable debit or gift cards, because that's a scam, guys. Anyone who's asking you to pay by gift card is a scam. And also asking you for bank account information to create a type of check that you've never seen or signed. So these are things that they cannot do. What they have to do is they have to connect you to a live sales representative within 2 seconds after you answer, transmit their telephone number and, if possible, name to your caller ID. Tell you right away who they are, okay? It's not gonna be like a 5-minute conversation and then they're like, hi, we've just talked about our whole lives and then I'm looking to sell you a new product. No, they have to disclose all of the information, terms of the sale, and then get permission to charge you if you agree to it. This is what the registry doesn't do. It doesn't apply to every unwanted call, okay? This is where I get a lot of blowback when I suggest people register for this. People say it doesn't work, it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm still getting phone calls. It does not apply to every unwanted phone call. I still think there's merit in registering for it though, and I'll explain to you why. It does not stop calls from political organizations, charities, debt collectors, informational calls, people taking surveys, and scammers, okay? So the key here is why you should still sign up. It will stop those legitimate telemarketer calls you receive. And if for whatever reason you get legitimate telemarketer calls that are being illegal, you can report them because that's illegal, okay? So this will also give you a good idea if someone is a scammer. I think this is in my opinion, the best use of the Do Not Call Registry. You sign up, you will get less of those telemarketing phone calls, okay? They should stop. And then if you still get all of these phone calls, then you know, okay, most likely this person is a scammer. If you don't recognize the phone number, you don't pick it up. If you do happen to pick it up because you think you recognize it or whatever, and the person on the other end violates any of the rules, you hang up and you report them, okay? Simple as that, you report them because that's illegal. So how do you sign up? donotcall.gov, or you call this number on the screen. You can register more than one number. You can only put 3 numbers on the list at a time. You also cannot register businesses. They cannot be a business number. So it's only for consumer numbers. There's a ton more FAQs on donotcall.gov. We're not going to go over all of them today, but if you have more questions, those are there. Number 4, block and report the numbers. I was talking about reporting those illegal calls. This is what's so important, especially when it comes to enforcement. I always hear from consumers of, well, nothing's being done. Who's doing anything about stopping the unwanted calls and texts? And I think it's a valid concern and complaint, right? I'm getting the calls and texts too. But if we don't report, then nobody knows that they're happening, right? So block the numbers that are coming in when they're coming in at the time. And they're going to work on legitimate robocalls. So say somebody is violating the actual Do Not Call Registry, they're violating the telemarketing rules and they just keep calling you, trying to sell you stuff. Block them, okay? And then report them because they are violating the federal rules of the Do Not Call Registry, and they're violating the rules of the telemarketing. So please report them. That will work on the legit telemarketers, unless they're also violating the spoofing rule, because it's illegal for them to spoof numbers too, which then they for sure should be reported again, because that's illegal. But this may not work on people who are spoofing phone numbers in general. Scammers do this all the time, right? So they're changing their phone number all the time. Does that mean you shouldn't block unwanted numbers or calls, numbers in general, so calls and texts? No, please still block all the calls and texts that are coming in, whether it's on your landline or your cell phone. I think it's still worth it to block those numbers, even if they're being spoofed, because you never know what other person's going to use that phone number to spoof you again, okay? Report the calls to us. We work with the Federal Trade Commission, and we gather all of these phone numbers up. because tracing these phone numbers is important when it comes to enforcement. So this is the phone number I mentioned earlier. This is the only phone number other than the toll-free number down in this right corner. These are the only numbers you should be calling when it comes to SCDCA. So you can report those calls to us, all those numbers, and really, I'm serious about this. We will take those numbers and we will report them to the FTC for you. And we'll work with the FTC. You can report texts by actually forwarding them to 7726, or that's just spam. That's the word spam. If you're young enough to not know, there are numbers associated, there are letters associated with the numbers on your cell phone. But if you're old enough, you know there are letters associated with the numbers on your cell phone. So that's spam. So 7726, you can forward those text messages to that number, and it will report those text messages. That goes to the FTC specifically. Report, report, report. If you don't report, then nothing's happening. Nothing's going to happen, okay? And when it comes to enforcement, people say, well, Bailey, okay, I'm not answering the phone. I'm still occasionally getting these phone calls. I've installed the call blocking software. I'm on the Do Not Call Registry. I'm forwarding all of my messages to my text messages to the FTC, and I'm reporting all of the phone numbers to SCDCA. I'm doing everything in my power to stop all of these phone calls. But what are you doing? What's the government doing? So SCDCA is collecting all that information from you guys. Right. We're sending it to the people who have the actual regulatory authority to do so, which would be the FCC and the FTC. Here are some things that have actually happened. This was released last year, so July 7th of 2022. This had to do with auto warranty scam robocalls. So the FCC specifically cut off a auto warranty scam robocall ring. And this was facilitating potentially billions of illegal robocalls for auto warranty scams. And RoboKiller, which is a very well-known company now that has, they also have a product that claims to stop robocalls, but they write blogs and things about robocalls. And they did an entire article talking about how robocalls plummeted, specifically about car warranties in 2022. And they were saying, well, why? And they credited it specifically to this action taken by the FCC. So what the FCC was, they partnered, it was actually 8 billion robocalls were made by this robocall ring on car warranties, which is wild. 8 billion phone calls. So they did an investigation through the FCC's Enforcement Bureau. And through that investigation, they told certain carriers, so like phone carriers, to cease and desist carrying specific traffic, potential illegal traffic from this network. And because of that, the calls plummeted. The robocalls about car warranties plummeted. So because of these actions, things are happening. Again, just this month. So May 11th, when was that? Last week? 6 days ago. 6 days ago, the FCC ordered blocking of calls from a place called One Eye. This is the first time they've ever ordered a robo-blocking order. And this has been going on for a while now, where there's this company, One Eye, who had received a formal notice from the FCC because the FCC had done an investigation into this company, and this company had been illegally letting in millions, if not billions, of robocalls into the country from other countries. And the FCC said, you better cease and desist. Now, I'm obviously paraphrasing this. It's much longer and more complicated than this, but they said, you better cease and desist. And they didn't. So they have now basically ordered them to stop, and they are forcing them. It's a long order for them to do these things, and there's fines associated, all of these different things. So there are actions that are being taken. So, and all of this is because a lot of different things. There's formal investigations, enforcement teams at work, but also reports of phone calls, phone numbers, reports from consumers, reports from cell phone companies, from major carriers, phone carriers, seeing numbers coming in hundreds, if not millions of times over and over and over again. So everybody working together and reporting these numbers to federal partners, and then them working to enforce the rules that they're creating. We did hold a Robocall webinar, was it last summer? There's been some actions done by the FCC. Stir and Shaken was another one where they put some rules on phone carriers in the United States that now are all in effect of how they have to track and basically block certain pathways and information coming through their lines. So there are things that are happening. It's hard to block all of the phone numbers. Scammers are smart, and they're always developing new ways to contact people. I say to consumers all the time, if a scammer could send you a carrier pigeon in the mail, they would. They have no shame. If they can contact you in a specific way, they will. They're going to show up in person. They're going to send you a piece of mail. They're going to send you an email. They're going to send you a text. They're going to call you. They're going to do whatever they can to contact you. And if governments are developing new ways to stop these forms of contact, they're going to develop new ways to get around that. So it's going to be a constant learning process and a constant development of new technologies on all ends. So that's the part where we need to do our part of not answering the phone, installing the apps, and all of the things that I've suggested today. So we've reached the official end, but hopefully you learned something new here. I know it can be extremely frustrating. Again, I'm a consumer just like you, and I get those calls and texts all the time. I will say, implementing the strategies that we've talked about today has lessened the phone calls. I used to answer the phone calls more often. And when I did so, I would get more and more phone calls. Once I stopped answering and just let it go to voicemail, I'm getting so many less phone calls. Text messages, you just ignore them, block them, delete them. Do not respond. Even if you think that it might be somebody you know, the key to knowing whether something is an actual spam text, they're not going to keep bombarding you with text messages, most likely. Like that lover text message I got, I actually let it sit there for a while because I was like, I wonder if they're going to keep texting me, because I was just interested. Like, that was such a funny text message to me. I was like, I wonder if they were going to keep trying, and they didn't. And that's because they are just sending massive amounts of text messages out just to see what'll stick. And they're not going to go back to people who don't respond, right? So don't respond, block them, and get them out of your life, all right? Again, thank you so much for being here. You guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much. Bye.